It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
We're going to move on to Sean's question. He says, based on the FOO, when do interest rates go from a percentage that's considered low interest, which is step 9, to high interest, which is step 3? What percentages should I be concerned about? For example, would 7% be considered high interest?
This is a great question, but why don't you walk them through when we were crafting the financial order of operations, there came this inclusion of risk-free rate of return, and how that there's always going to be risk-free rate of return, but there's also a premium for investing, and how that went into this whole decision.
Yeah, when it comes to low interest versus high interest, it's a little bit subjective. But before I talk about the subjective nature of that, I also think it's important to mention the types of debt you carry matter. And what I mean by that is debt on credit cards are different than debts on businesses that you own, or debts on a home. And debts on a business appreciable asset that you own is different than debt on a depreciable asset like cars. So even though interest rates can be applied to all the different debts, not all debt is created equal. That's sort of the first baseline we have to lay out. So then it becomes, okay, well, how do we determine what is low interest versus what is high interest? The way that we arrived at that academically is by figuring out, for your age, for where you are, what is your equity risk premium? Meaning, if you were to take those dollars and go invest elsewhere, and you were going to go put those dollars to work, what would you expect to be compensated for taking that risk? All of us can go out right now and go get the risk-free rate. We can go put our money in a cash, CD, treasury bill, fill in the blank, and we can get the risk-free rate. Some of us can then take those dollars and go deploy them elsewhere, and if we take on more risk, we are expected to receive a greater rate of return. Well, generally speaking, as we age, as we get older, as we move closer towards financial independence, as we move closer towards needing our dollars, the equity risk premium that we can expect to make on our dollars decreases. What that means in very plain layman's terms is that high interest debt for someone in their 20s is likely very different than high interest debt for someone in their 50s.
So let's actually talk about this a little bit, because we've seen this play out with student loans. You could probably look at this for mortgages, even though, remember, there's elements like deductibility of the interest and so forth that comes into play. But I think, I've always told people, I don't want you really thinking about prepaying that low interest mortgage until it's step 9, and typically it's going to happen when you're 45 and above. Yep. And why is that? Is because from ages 20 to 45, you're at the peak multiplier
your
effect.
Dollar's got some
I
juice.
mean, you got a lot of benefit because you have time on your side. The compounding is really working for you. But let's take the example of what Bo just talked about. The risk-free rate of return right now, if you go look at the 10-year Treasury, it's over 3.5%. And I'm just going to grab 3.5%. I think it's 3.6, 3.7, depending upon what's going on. But we're just going to say 3.5%. For a 20-something, you probably would think that because they're aggressive, because they have decades ahead of them in the future, you could put a risk premium on that of about 4%. Sure. So, I mean, it very
maybe
easily.
Even more, yeah.
Because as interest rates go up, that risk-free rate of return is probably the Treasury is going to go up as well. So right now, I mean, looking at that example, a 20-something probably isn't going to cross that threshold until over 7.5%. But, a person in their 40s or 50s, they're not going to want to have, a spread of 4% because they know that they're going to use more asset allocation. They're going to be more conservative because they got retirement on the horizon. So it might be possible that at that point, maybe the number is 5.5 to 6%. Sure. And that's why I think it frees you to where if you're a 40-something, especially your late 40s, hopefully you've made it through. You're at step 9 of the financial order of operations. Go attack that debt. Pay it down, because it's not about, because there's two parts of this equation. There is getting wealthy, and then there's keeping wealth. And what's interesting is while you're young, there's a big question mark on will you be wealthy?
That's right.
But if you've done everything while you're younger, the maximization strategy shifts to, hey, we've done the right things. We've created wealth. We've created independence to a degree. So we need to make sure we keep it because it's not guaranteed that you'll keep it. And that's why you do see the risk analysis shift. In the beginning, the risk is you're not going to be wealthy because you didn't put enough money to work. As you get older, it's now the risk model says, hey, how do we keep what we've built? That's what all this is structured off of. So I think, Sean, I love it when we get to do these nerdy questions because, that's not how this is. This is designed for you to go to moneyguy.com/resources, just download the resources, or you can go to learn.moneyguy.com and actually get the course. We've made it where it's digestible. We don't have to get into all this nerdy stuff, but I know a lot of you guys you're the money maximizers, you're the accountants, you're the pilots, you're the engineers. You want to know how stuff works. And I love that I actually get to show you that our fingerprints really did try to think about things not only from what's successful for you in an easy to digest format, but also what has the nuts and bolts of true theory built into it so that this thing will serve you no matter where you are in the financial journey.
And I want to remind you guys, this year, if you're listening to this in 2022, is one single year. When we talk about equity risk premiums, we're talking about the rate of return you expect you can earn over a longer period of time. So the market's down this year, so you can make the funny joke about, I'm not making any money this year. Stretch it out. That's why one of the things, if you're a client of mine, and we've had a meeting recently, I've said, look, here's what's going on in your portfolio year to date. But look at what happens when we stretch that out for the past 3 years, the past 5 years, the past 10 years. You can see that over the long term, individual years seem sporadic and there's no rhyme or reason to it. But when you start putting those years together over a long time horizon in a risk-adjusted, well-diversified portfolio, the numbers actually start looking pretty darn good. And I think most of our seasoned investors out there in the chat would agree with that. Yeah, 2022 is not great. But man, if you look at what I've done since 2015, still looks pretty darn good.